when we're looking at historical record, we have to look at who's in power at what particular moment. When we're talking about Augustus Caesar, interestingly, when you do research on his birth date, it was right around the same time as Jesus Christ. In fact, he declared himself to be the savior of the common people of men, the common people who belong to men. He said he was the savior of that. Interestingly, he placed himself as a godlike figure on that at the same time that Jesus Christ showed up. And if you're following the proper calendar, you would understand that his October date would have been more believable as relating to him competing with Jesus Christ, because of the fact was that that is the more proper calendar date that Jesus Christ showed up, birthed to the world. The This very Augustus Caesar said, let's tax and register the world. So when you tax and register something, you enroll it. These three words kind of could be used as the translation in the book of Luke when it said Augustus Caesar said, let's tax the world. He said, let's register the world. Some translations use that. Others say, let's enroll. So when we're looking at this, everything you do in society, in legal civil society, is based on a tax, register, enrollment. And therefore, the purpose of the document here, this document, was to tax, enroll, and register. The interesting difference between common law and civil law was that civil registration required the adoption of a name. Common law did not embrace the belief system of adoption. So you couldn't adopt a name or take on a name in the common law concept. But in civil law, of course, adoption came about because they were kind of like subsuming so many different cultures and people and then placing them into a registration tax system that enrolled them into a temporal tax of their temporal body corporate value working for the state, being servants of men. Certainly not anything to do with spiritual. Even though the Caesars claimed that they were sons of the gods. And Jesus at the same time comes on to the map at the very time of the height of Roman Caesar society and comes up on the map as son of a god, the god. Sorry, son of the god, not a god. The Roman Caesars could be basically in belief to be part of any mythological god, but the difference between Jesus Christ was he was son of God, not a god or any other various gods. He was the God that was of the Bible or of the scriptures, and therefore was not to be mistaken with these pagan concepts, these polytheistic societies. So the beginning of this document that frames you is an accusation, because that's how civil law works. It's based on taxation and accusation and impost, which requires you to be accused and charged of being involved with a name. So the one side that's interesting in Canada is Canada was founded on common law, not on civil law. But it's amazing how the civil law has mingled its way into society worldwide. So you don't have a worldwide event that happened with the execution of Jesus Christ that did not impact this, because he came in at a time that was canceling debt, canceling impost, canceling the concept of tax, and saying that you were free from the legal system, not from God, your creator, but from something that would be tainted or torturous to you under a man-made society that went away from the harmony of God. So, of course, the issuance of these birth certificates were very important because these not only represented being certificates of libelous against Jesus Christ, but the only origin of these certificates, when you look back to certificates in the Roman civil society, were only issued to people who renounced the authority of Jesus Christ, and therefore they carried them as a symbolization that they were not of God's people, and that they were there to do whatever is required to burn incense or ceremonial activity in basically adherence to the Roman society, which is what we're seeing today. So, of course, they need you to take a shot in order to show your subservience to the Roman society that you're involved in. And so nothing is different, nothing new under the sun. They're basically wanting you to do a sacrificial ceremony to show your adherence to the state. Because remember, in their view, you're all in this together. You're in a collective, and that's what legal is, the collective. It has nothing to do with the separation of good from evil. It is a collective of the bad, of those that are the no-goods. Uniquely in Canada, we have the province that locates the very system that actually takes care of the no-goods, and that's in New Brunswick, Canada, and NB in law means no goods. So they register all the no goods in New Brunswick. Those that are the sureties for these certificates are all the no goods. They've gone contrary to God, so they register them all in one province. You think that's by chance? Say what you may. You haven't done enough research. You think I'm just splitting hairs, but I'm not. They have put this in place. And that's why even the postal code for the registry system for New Brunswick also even uses the postal code system that relates to T4s when you file a tax return. It's even in their postal code. So they haven't done anything hiding anything from you. They just think you're so dumb you won't see it because you're too busy trying to register things into a system that has nothing to do with you. You're too busy trying to be something you're not. Therefore, you're going to pay an impost and a tax for your fraud and your impostoring of a title that is not yours. So tax registration and enrollment are all part of the same situation. And therefore, what are they planning to do? Well, I read you this. Maybe a lot for a mouthful for one video, but good that I combine this into one. I was dealing with the legal system on wills. And it says, the law behind wills, legal wills, becomes tedious when many parties are not present. Typically, in many cases, with limited family surname members. This mainly occurred after World War II, where many wills had no possible recipients, so the assets went to the government. Now, could you understand why now they're doing a domestic on the soil war in commerce, mersement, which is war? Oh no, they're not going to send out a nuclear bomb. They don't have to. They're getting you to walk up and get shot. And so therefore, they're canceling out their bonds, their government bonds, because they put this system in place in 1910, 1911, and they are planning on fulfilling this. Their 2030 agenda is all based on as the days of Noah, because it was in the days of Noah, there was a 120-year period between the beginning of Noah's following God's will and basically God closing the door of salvation on that ark. And so if you take 1910, when they started to issue especially these short form birth certificates, which I believe symbolized the days being cut short. And then basically they knew that those that would surety that would end up out of salvation. And they would go to their death, drowned in commerce, whatever you want to think, and eventually burned based on a misplaced trust. So the 2030 agenda, if you take 120 years and add that to 1910, 1911, you're right at 2030. And there seems to be a lot of indicators pointing to that having a lot to do with the meeting of good and evil, the divine salvation of God's people coming in to enact judgment against the world kingdoms of Satan. Well, you can choose which side you're going to be on, but certainly they're now just canceling certificates to balance the budget of the public. So all the people that got shot, we don't know how many of them got placebos or got the real thing, but whatever's going to happen, there's going to be definitely a result of these plagues that have basically been voluntarily taken by people because they believed in governments of men, human, World Health Organization, World Trade Organization, UN-related consortiums, instead of putting their faith in God, where they should have. And therefore, their misplaced trust is going to end up with them in being burned or in a hell. So therefore, right now, if I had to add up what I'm just seeing a cancellation of debt. They did it in the World Wars, because at 1910, it was only a few years earlier when they, to the actual World War I, and then basically the Federal Reserve banking system, and it needed to be in place in order to cancel out these bonds. So just picture your world leaders at that time sitting around a room playing chess and saying, how many pawns can we knock off out of all these different countries, and play around with a gaming system of value that has nothing to do with being invaluable for life. So this was not a moral direction chess game. This was a logistic chess game on money. And so whatever they did, they're doing a mathematical equation. They're canceling out their liability on the debt because they can't manage it anymore. So it's better to eliminate the people that are involved so there's no one left to collect. And where does the money go when they cancel out the certificates? It goes right back to the state anyways, because there'll be no one around to collect under a will.